I'm Kathy Smith, the director of the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society here at Community College of Philadelphia. Today's Perspectives interview is conducted by David Travaskis, who is an adjunct faculty member here and is also the pro bono counsel for the Pennsylvania Bar Association. David also serves as a member of the Center's advisory board. In today's interview, David speaks to Mike Lee. Mr. Lee is the supervising attorney for the Philadelphia Criminal Record Expungement Project, and he works to expunge arrest records so that returning citizens are not harmed in seeking employment. Mr. Lee has been dedicated to public service since his time as a Drexel Law student.
Welcome to the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society's Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of Community College of Philadelphia. I'm David Travaskis, adjunct professor in the Paralegal Studies program. Today it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest, attorney Michael Lee. Michael, thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me today, David.
And I think our audience today is going to find it very interesting, the area of law that you've chose to practice in. So why don't we jump right into it? What do you do?
Well, David, I am a community lawyer here in Philadelphia and growing throughout the Commonwealth. And what I mean by community lawyer is when I left law school in 2009, I really tried to gain a sense of what the people in my immediate area needed. And unfortunately, like the rest of Philadelphia, criminal law, and more importantly, the collateral or secondary consequences of criminal law is the primary need for my community. So I began criminal law practice as well as co-founded a nonprofit where our main project is removing non-conviction data of arrest from people's backgrounds.
And the fancy word for all of that is expungement, but I don't think many people watching us understand that you would need to expunge data even if you were never convicted, just because you were arrested.
Right.
So can you tell us what the process is in terms of what data is collected just when an arrest is made here in Philadelphia?
To begin, it makes sense that you would think that when you are found not guilty of something, the information would not exist, nor that it could be used against you. Because in the United States, we believe very firmly that you are innocent until proven guilty. Unfortunately, as a result of technological advances and legislation and other social factors, we know that the existence of arrest records, not the conviction or the result of the arrest, but the arrest in and of itself is harmful to people. And it's harmful particularly in areas of employment, housing, and now through online dating explosion, even your love life.
We may get back to that. That may be very interesting to some members of our audience. But I guess when you said employment, I sort of was startled because I always was told that the only thing an employer can ask is, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Can they ask, have you ever been arrested?
Well, it's just not very helpful to ask if someone has ever been arrested because an arrest record, first, I have no control of when I get arrested. A decision to arrest, as I remind my activist friends, always remains in the discretion of the police. So I never decide to get arrested. Yet the evidence of that arrest is stored and maintained not just by the local police, not just by the state police, not just by the FBI, but also by the court system itself. And that information that is collected by the court system is publicly available over the internet and also being sold in bulk to private background check companies. And lastly, the information they make public is being repeated and copied by third-party websites who then charge you their own expungement fee to get your name removed from Google search. And it's just really been an explosion of harm to people as technology has advanced and arrest records has maintained. So for example, when the Philadelphia City Council passed the Ban the Box legislation, they found in their legislative finding of facts that 1 in 5 Philadelphians has a criminal record, meaning 1 in 5 Philadelphians has been arrested, fingerprinted, and photographed by the Philadelphia police. That information has been sent to the state police and the FBI, and the court system itself maintains it. Now, until someone who's been arrested takes the proactive step of filing for an expungement, that information remains. And the court in the last few years have tried to take some proactive steps to conduct what they would call automatic expungements, or the district attorney's office might say they have a program where if you waive some constitutional rights, like the right to a trial or the right to confront your accuser, then in exchange, you can not only have your charges against you withdrawn, but they'll have automatic expungement. And sometimes that automatic expungement has meant the court in and of itself removes the information on your behalf, but most of the time it means that the district attorney will not oppose it, so it would be granted automatically. So there's countless number of individuals who have gone through the judicial system, believe they have completed it, believe it has been expunged because they completed this program with automatic expungements, yet unfortunately when they go for a background check during a hiring process, an employer can pull up their court file and see what they were charged with in this funny disposition called ARD. And without being trained in the law or knowing the nuances of employment law, the hiring person might just say, well, it's easier for me just to move on to the next person. And we see this kind of example over and over and over with not just diversionary programs like the one I just highlighted, but also with any form of non-conviction data and some forms of conviction data.
Well, it's fascinating. There's so many details here, but the very fact that it is your right not to have to reveal that you've been arrested seems to be a right that's been lost because they can find that out very easily. And so they can't say they didn't hire you because you had been arrested,
right.
But they don't have to hire you. They go to the next guy. What was this project, the mayor's Ban the Box? I think a lot of people know about it, but that project of the mayor's was to help people who had criminal records get jobs, right?
Correct. And from my perspective as someone who is engaged in the criminal record reform and dissemination and use of criminal records, I think it really highlights the recognition of some of these known legislative and social harms that people face. As I said previously, in their findings, they said 1 in 5 Philadelphians has a record. And the Ban the Box legislation essentially tries to give 1 in 5 Philadelphians the same opportunity the other 4 have, which is when you first meet someone, you judge them for who they are today and not what they might have done in the past or what they may do in the future. And again, this Ban the Box legislation is good because it's empowering more people to seek employment. It's giving employers a little more clarity in what they can and can't ask about, but there's nothing stopping them from the second interview bringing this up. So for a lot of people, Ban the Box was a bit of a letdown. So people thought the box was banned in its entirety, but it was really just moved from day 1 to day 2, or it gives you a false sense of optimism because you have conditional employment pending the return of your background. And as you said, it's been very difficult to discover the hiring practices of at-will employment. And that's what we're trying to engage the community in now, is let us know what employers are saying and doing during the hiring process so we can be more informed as consumers, because that's where we have probably the most say is our buying decisions and supporting the hiring and business practices of companies that violate Pennsylvania law by using criminal records illegally, and also just by helping people know where they can turn to have a chance for employment for the first job to get to their second job or third job, and hopefully a job that produces a career and not just minimum wages.
All right. The ban the box and what we've been talking about has actually, though, been about convictions. And what you're saying, though, is that even in an arrest situation where there has been no conviction, where I might have been pulled up with other people completely innocently, but they went through, they processed me, that very arrest can keep me from getting a job, perhaps, when somebody finds out about it. Have you talked to people who you know have lost jobs because of that? And can you share any stories about that with us?
Absolutely. And again, one of the main driving forces behind my work and the work of Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, or PULSE, which is the nonprofit that I co-founded, is to help those who are most affected by an issue bring about the change. So I can share a story with you. However, I think the best people to share the stories are the people whose stories they belong to. And if you go to our website, which is paexpungementproject.org, we have a section called Voices from the Front Line, and we've collected stories on our hotline so that people can remain anonymous, so you don't know just by face or recognition whose story it is, but you can feel the emotion in which they tell it. So a quick version of how this is impacting people is I met an older woman. She was probably in her mid-50s, and she lives in what our city has coined a high crime area. So as a result of that, the police have much greater discretion to fight crime, so to speak. So they had a search warrant for a property on that block, and they ran into this woman's house with their guns out, kicked down the door, made her get on the ground, and started yelling about, where are the drugs, where are the drugs, where are the drugs? Well, unfortunate for the police, they made a clerical error in the number of the house they were supposed to search. So this woman not only had the fear of having her door kicked in, being arrested and processed by the police for drugs that were never found, she then had to retain a private lawyer at her own cost just to go into court and say the police searched the wrong house, there were never any guns or drugs here. As a result, she can't get back into the nursing field because she was charged with felony drug charges, and it's really through their own mistake has caused 10, 15 months of struggle and stress for this woman, all because of the block she happens to live on. And through no criminal conduct of her own, she has been treated like a criminal from the moment the police kicked in the door, pretty much up and through when we finally were able to remove this arrest from her record.
Oh, that was what I wanted to do, is get to the end of the story. You were able to get the arrest data removed. And how do you do that?
We do this through judicial order. So the way the Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, or PULSE, we have a keystone project called the Criminal Record Expungement Project, or CREP. Through CREP, we offer direct legal services to low-income Philadelphians to remove this non-conviction data. So as I've explained, once someone is arrested, that record is created. The district attorney has discretion throughout the process whether or not to agree with the charges by the police, add charges, or subtract charges. They can also offer you a diversionary program or take you to trial. At trial, they bear the burden of proving each charge beyond reasonable doubt. So even if you were convicted of one charge, there's still other charges on your arrest that could be eligible for removal. Once the case is closed and the final disposition has been reached, whether it's conviction data as guilty, guilty plea, or no contest, or non-conviction data, which is essentially every other disposition, we can then determine what is eligible for expungement. Once we determine what's eligible for expungement, we file petitions in the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia County before the motions room. These petitions include all the specific charges that we want to get removed, the basic biographical information of the person who wants it removed, and the reason as to why it's being harmed. Now, our courts have been very forward-thinking in expungement law, and their fundamental reasoning behind expungements, the balance test that the judges do, it's not based on the right to privacy, which you would think of automatically, and rather what the Supreme Court has supported since 1981, the year before I was born, is that the proper balance is the harm that the person is feeling against the specific need for these charges. So the district attorney has a very heavy burden of proving why they want to keep this information now when they thought it was in the best interest of society not to try to convict someone on it previously, or they failed to convict someone on it previously. So the burden is very much finally on the district attorney's office. So in court. So prior to court and after court, the burden is exclusively on the person who's been arrested.
I wanted to go back to the woman with the nursing, the older woman, as you said, and I do notice you've already said that you're 30 years old. 1981, I did the math, you're in your early 30s, before you were born. And since I'm older than this old woman you were helping, we won't go any further on that. But she then was not convicted of the crime. Clearly, they broke into the wrong house. The police had just made an error. And so when she goes to court with her lawyer, she's found not guilty, or actually a judge probably throws it out before anything happens. But then when she went to get jobs, she was finding she couldn't get jobs because it showed her in an arrest. And obviously nurses have to be very careful around medicine and drugs, so anything involving drugs would be serious. How did she know to come to you? And what did you do for her?
Well, this particular woman came to one of our criminal record expungement project intakes, and we hold them monthly throughout the city of Philadelphia. And again, if you go to our website, you'll be able to see our upcoming clinic dates. But essentially,
and that's open to anybody in Philadelphia?
Yes, anyone who has the time and availability to come in may come in. We do have eligibility criteria because, again, the need is so great that we couldn't possibly address it with our volunteer services. But basically, if you make under 200% of the poverty guidelines, and it depends on your the number of people in your household, but on our website we have a nice little chart to help you make that determination. And we also can only help currently with Philadelphia County charges. So if you live in Center County, but you have an arrest in Philadelphia County, we can address that Philadelphia County arrest. But if you live in Philadelphia County and you have an arrest in Montgomery County, right now we cannot represent you in Montgomery County, but we're trying to work towards getting partners all throughout the Commonwealth.
So she comes to your clinic.
Right.
She meets you, you hear about it, she qualifies for your services, and she's already lost jobs. So isn't it too late to help her?
No, it's never too late to help anyone. And as attorneys, we have a special place in society, and that's why we're allowed to govern ourselves, right? Is because we have this higher calling beyond just profit. And for this woman to have to endure this harm through no fault of her own is unjust, and it's an injustice somewhere, so it's an injustice everywhere, to paraphrase Dr. King. And one of my favorite quotes comes from Charles Houston, who I call the godfather of the civil rights movement, where he says, as an attorney, you're either a social parasite or a social engineer. So as someone who has the ability to help, I think it's very important that we do help. And again, this expungement provides a very short kind of relief for this woman. I agree, she's already been harmed greatly by our court system, but our court system can do everything it can to repair that harm and hopefully make her better.
This is so interesting. You are in court doing these motions a lot. How big is the need? How many motions have you filed this, just in an average week, in an average month?
Part of CREP's mission, again, is community engagement and community empowerment. So one of our techniques is that we'll do an intake and maybe have 30 people that we accept. And from those 30 people, we can have anywhere from 100 to 250 arrests. And we keep all these people in a group, and we'll file 100 to 200 petitions at one time to show the court this is the impact of this harm on people's lives, to overwork the district attorney's office so that they start to say, you know, we're getting hundreds more expungements than we were before. We need to do something differently. And last year, we filed over 2,000 expungement and redaction petitions, and this year we hope to double it.
I wanted to clarify this. You said the we. How many lawyers are working on this project?
Right now, we have 4 volunteer attorneys and about 35 volunteer law students.
So this is all volunteer time?
Yes.
And I guess the question that comes from that is, are you rich, or how can you do all this volunteer work?
Well, I went to Drexel Law School, and I was part of its inaugural class. And a lot of people ask, when they ask me about, isn't it scary to volunteer this much or not make money and this kind of stuff? And I say, I went to a law school before there was a law school. There was no building, there was no library. There was just a commonly held idea that this is needed, this will work, and this will help people. And from that foundation, I worked with you, and we started many project pieces in Philadelphia high schools to try to curb youth violence through creative problem solving. And it was, again, this is an idea that's needed, this is an idea that people will like, and this is an idea that will help others. And I approached the expungement project the same way. In fact, this is an even greater need because social science is starting to prove, and the Department of Corrections' own numbers indicate that when someone's released from custody, in those first 3 years, they have a 66% chance of recommitting a crime or recidivating. 66%. But if you go 7 years out, someone who's committed a crime is less likely to commit an offense than someone who's never committed a crime before. So if we can invest into people, sometimes for the first time they might feel, if we can invest in people during those first 3 years to try to get them stable employment, stable housing, and a stable family environment, then their chance of committing a crime and further harming themselves or society decreases greatly. And for me, I don't care about making money because I don't want to get killed. You know, I don't want to get robbed. I live in West Philadelphia. When I wear a suit, I can be the target of people who feel like their options are limited. And when I'm wearing my regular clothes, I can be the target of people who are supposed to be protecting and serving. So for me, the financial component is not nearly as important as the call for social justice. And I quote Dr. King a lot because he's a very dynamic person. And one of his sermons he talks a lot about is the knock at midnight. And in everyone's life, when you're in your most comfortable time, you know, sleep in bed, there will come a knock at midnight. And how you respond to that knock shows a lot about your character. Do you tell that stranger at the door to go away, not to wake your kids, not to make me uncomfortable? Or do you stir yourself up, go to the door, and see what could cause someone to have to knock at your door at this hour? So for me, I don't hear the knock of money. I hear the knock of justice at my door.
Well, if people want to knock on your door, you've mentioned the website, but you've talked about this hotline. You guys have a hotline number that anyone in Philadelphia can call?
Absolutely, and we're actually encouraging people to call, and our stories are hopefully going to be part of the Access to Justice campaign to try to get more money in general for pro bono programming and people who are in great need of legal services. And the hotline number is 267-908-4397.
You want to say that one more time?
Certainly. The hotline number is 267-908-4397.
I wanted to ask you to end, because I think the people watching today have to be fascinated by the stories that you've already shared. But if you could end with the one person that you've worked with so far that you think is the best model for why you keep going, doing this kind of good work.
The one that spoke the most directly to me is the one that I have the most in common with the other person, as most stories go. So this gentleman is about my height, about my complexion, about my build, and he actually was a little ahead of me because he graduated from an Ivy League undergraduate university, and his mother was being defrauded of her home. And he testified against the person defrauding to save his mother's home, and that person a week later came by his house to try to start trouble. And the gentleman broke a window, cut his hand, and ran off before the police came. My friend filed a police report that night and moved on with his life. The person who cut his hand waited a month, went to the police station, and fabricated an assault. So from this one conversation, the police put out an arrest warrant for a very common arrest record in Philadelphia, which is aggravated assault, simple assault, terroristic threats, recklessly endangering another person, and possession of instrument of crime. So 1 felony and 4 misdemeanors off a unresearched, unsupported story. A few years later, my friend gets pulled over and finds out about this warrant that was never presented to him, resolves it in court. After the complaining witness doesn't show up 3 times, the DA then says, wait a second, according to the first police report, the victim and defendant are reversed. What's going on? Let's throw this case out. So the case gets thrown out, and my friend moves on with his life and applies for a position in the Department of Education with the Obama administration. Makes it all the way to the final interview stage, is in a hotel in DC, and gets a phone call that morning. Hey, we have very bad news. We can't let you into the White House because something came up on your criminal record that we're not sure about. So it turns out the court administration didn't update its file fast enough, so it seemed as if this gentleman had an open case for a violent felony, and because of that, he couldn't even interview for this position in the White House. We filed expungement for him, and at the first listing, the district attorney objected because it's their policy that you wait 6 months from the disposition of the case before they think you can have it expunged. The law says 30 days, because that's when your appeal period would end, and the DA wants you to wait an additional 5 months. So the judge continued the case for 1 month and basically just said, young man, I'm sorry what happened to you, but please let it happen for another month, and then we'll resolve this for you. That following month, he was able to have it expunged, but he can never get this job at the White House. The only person being hurt was this young man who is very much like me.
That's a powerful story, Michael, and it really is great, the work that you're doing. That's all the time we have for today, and I do want to thank my guest, Michael Lee, for joining us. And I want to thank all of you at home for tuning in. You have been watching the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society's Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of the Community College of Philadelphia. I'm David Travaskis, adjunct professor in the Paralegal Studies program. For more information, please contact us at the college, and we will see you next time on CCP TV.